My friend Carl told me once the thing he swore he'd never do was work in a takeaway. Carl used to get angry about the representation of our people, particularly men, like us. He'd say to me, "Why is it whenever we're in films, we're not rugged and handsome and we aren't playing heroes?" And it drove him crazy because we weren't rich, and in this country we weren't even Asians. But we're all hungry for a lie. Carl wanted to be an actor, he said. But he married young and he had kids to feed and bills to pay, so he did the thing he swore he'd never do. Carl ran a Chinese takeaway. He cooked for the late night crowd who came in pissed and ordered by numbers, who didn't care if it was dripping in monosodium glutamate or grease or fat, the way Carl would never cook it, but like they always say our food is. And Carl cooked for people who were too tired to cook themselves, who just wanted to watch telly and wanted the easy comfort of the numbers on the Chinese takeaway menu. Digression number 1, our food. There was this BBC series about migrant stories, and when it got to the Chinese story, it was all about food. It was an hour of food and more food and restaurants and takeaways and how tasty our dim sum is and how slurpy our noodles are. It was all food, food, food. And well, look, now we got COVID, hey, and they're smashing the windows of our restaurants and takeaways and throwing bricks through the windows of our restaurants and takeaways and pissing on the floors of our restaurants and takeaways and calling us names and attacking us in the streets and saying it's all because of our food. But I never met an Asian person in my life who ever ate a bat, and I had to Google what a pangolin is because I had no fucking idea, and neither did Carl. So I guess our food won't save us when racist love turns to racist hate. Digression number 2. When I try and convince other Chinese people that I'm some kind of big shot in the world of entertainment and art and culture, I sometimes have said, but I've been at the Royal Court. But truth is, I've never been on Netflix or Marvel, so they literally say, what the fuck is the Royal Court? I guess it started with Hong Kong. Carl didn't approve of their protests in Hong Kong, and he thought it was wrong that the protesters sometimes called the cops smelly cunts. And he thought that was worse than the tear gas and pepper balls and batons and bullets. And when Carl saw the film of the Uyghurs in China dancing and singing in what they call a vocational education centre, Carl believed it was for the Uyghurs' very own good. Digression number 3. The city-state where my father's from is about to lock up a man for standing in the streets holding up a smiley face sign as an act of protest. And this is what we're known for. Like, people always say to me, "Oh, Singapore. Isn't that the place where you get caned for chewing gum and they fine you for not flushing the toilet?" And I'll say, no! There's a lot more to Singapore than that. We got some really nice food. But Asian regimes love to tell that lie that little Asian people need to be kept in our place with our heads down and working, not being rugged and handsome and heroes in movies. Then Carl started sending me videos to watch. He sent me a video of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson can talk and talk without even scripts, without notes, without ever pausing for breath, without ever once saying, "I don't know," or "I'm not sure," or "let me check that." But I guess the overarching sentiment made some sort of sense to my friend Carl, who sent me more videos. And Carl posted something on his timeline about Muslims. Carl sent me 2 long videos of white people with flags marching around in various European cities with a leaden voiceover lamenting that loyal patriots were being abjected by an elite liberalia communist cartel of international banking conglomerates that want to replace classical architecture with soulless high-rises. And I snapped. And I said, "Carl, brother, what the fuck is the matter with you? Why are you watching and listening to this dull, distorted dirge of dog's feces shat out of the arsehole of DU? Because it's heartless, and it's torpid, and it's tedious, and it's so unutterably fucking boring. And you know what's even worse about this rat's arsehole of fascism masquerading as an honest patriotic pride? It's not even meant for you. You open-hearted, gullible fucking goldfish with your gargantuan gaping mouth wide, ready to receive this colossal cunt-wittery. It's meant for angry white men. It's not meant for you." And I felt bad. Because Carl was the guy who once drove all night to watch me in a play. Because he wanted to touch that world of drama and dreams. That world that was a lie to us. But I guess we were all hungry for that lie. Then Carl started objecting to lockdown. Carl had already been going on about 5G. Carl thinks COVID is a giant hoax. And they're holding up Q signs in Trafalgar Square. Where they go one, they go all. Because the world is being run now by the deep state, where they drink blood and molest children and rig votes so they can force you to wear a mask, so they can keep you in your house in level down tier 3. But are they aliens or lizards or communists or all three? And anyway, it's all the fault of immigrants and invaders. But Carl, you're an immigrant to them, just like me. And meanwhile, there's a man in a hospital bed, and he's gasping for air, and he can't breathe, and he's about to succumb to that virus that they're blaming you and me for, Carl. And with his last breath, the man in the hospital bed rips off his ventilator and says to the Filipino nurse who's trying to keep the man alive and keep herself alive, who's unlikely to object to working in high-risk conditions. So, Filipino nurses were decimated in the first wave of the virus that we were all blamed for, Carl. You, me, and the Filipino nurse. But the man who can't breathe tells the immigrant Filipino nurse with no papers and no status that none of it's real and none of it's true and none of it means anything. And he knows this because he saw it in a video on YouTube. And that the undocumented Filipino nurse with no access to healthcare herself is all part of that lie the man who can't breathe is so hungry for. I haven't heard from my friend Carl in a while. I hope he's okay. I hope we're all okay.
The big white cop. He sure knows a lot about how to stop the march of a people who only want the choices the big white cop takes for granted, grew up with, and was nurtured on, and was raised on, and once swore to protect, and once swore to serve, but now beats down on a hot, humid island on the other side of the world that burns with resistance, far, far, far away from his overcast Hartford backdrop. The big white chief, this bully has beef, and his leitmotif is tear gas canisters and rubber shells and sprays that sting, which he knows how to direct, which he orders his South China underlings to fire. There, and there again, and again. Till the street is carnage, till the people are screaming, till the crowds are running, till the tears are streaming, till the umbrellas are collapsing, till the barricades are tumbling down and back and away from the big white chief with angry red beef. Your name reminds me of a DVD porn star called Ben Dover, whose greatest hits include Posh Birds and Dirty Deviants. And it might be posh, but it's surely dirty to bet on church kids who want the same life you had, the same rights you had, the same joy you had when you were like them, running free, running wild, on lazy summer days, knowing you were safe, knowing you weren't chained, knowing you had a future ahead. But you travelled half the world to beat down and oppress former colonial subjects you won't ever protect, you don't actually serve, whose human rights you will not uphold because Big Brother and the party doesn't value them as humans, so neither do you. So you can just abdicate, and you can just denigrate, and you can just delegate the brutal clampdown because you figured they're just cockroach. But you never expect, because you didn't respect. You couldn't detect that the people would not take it anymore. There'd be no blue birds over this white man called Dover. And I saw you complain because the sports coach told your daughter you should be ashamed. You think that's unfair, and you want to complain because this is your privilege. But you weren't maimed, and you weren't beaten for the grievous crime of wanting what you took for granted in those halcyon days as the sun set on the empire. What the pearl of the Orient enchanted you. And you learned how to police little natives with smoke and fire. And you say you're invested because your children grew up here. But you didn't need to protest. and you've never had to fear the tread of a totalitarian boot. Because you're the one who wore it, and you're the one who used it. Do it. Do it. You were heard to cry. In the operation of dispersal of those who dare to defy and who don't live in a dress rehearsal. You say your skin is thick, but your temper is quick. And you call it professional, but it just looks obsessional. You served one empire, then another, from the land of hope and glory to the five-star mother. Different flag, same old story. I'm truly sorry. Your daughter was told you were someone to be ashamed of. But you served a regime that regularly targets and intimidates people's families and friends with threats and coercions to keep them silent and compliant. And we all have to count our blessings in this life, and it's surely better to be told a few home truths than languish in a prison cell or work camp at the mercy of the state, isn't it? Isn't it? There is an ethnically Chinese man in his 50s advancing down the street, which looks like an urban war zone. There is tear gas shells exploding all around him, and a noise like firecrackers spits through the hot, humid air. Behind the Chinese man is a wall of flimsy umbrellas and a makeshift barricade, which they have you believe is funded by the CIA. The Chinese man in his 50s wears glasses and a black t-shirt. His white face mask is pulled down to his neck. "I want to speak to your commander," he shouts. Bang! Another tear gas shell explodes by his side. And another. And another. "I want to speak to your commander." And the superintendent from the dear old rain-soaked bastion of democracy, that is dear old Blighty, orders his rank-and-file Chinese officer to fire. Again and again. The superintendent is only doing his duty, and he's only doing the bidding of a government that hates and fears its citizens so much, it won't let them breathe clean air if they dare to ask for their rights. Is your name Shave? We've all had to put up with jokes about Chinese names and two Wongs not making a white. So I make no apologies whatsoever when I say that this is one white that gives a very fucking close shave. The big white man, with the angry red tan, doing all he can to maintain the order laid down by the puppet on the string like a leftover relic of colonial might. But he doesn't care whose bidding he does. As long as they have might, he will give fright and stamp out the fight. And we're not supposed to say he's white, because they scream about supremacy when it suits their ends. But this one's on their side, so he's off limits, because they'll say it's racist. But to say this is prejudice is surely just credulous, because what I can see clearly is terror and fear aimed at Asian bodies by an angry white man.